Privet Drug. Hello, friends. Hello, comrades. So, the ISS and Soul Catcher technology is now set up for $1 million viewings of Wormwood that they put in place a couple years ago that have reached some completions for a space hotel. And its only stipulation is that you can't say the name of the Messiah. Who owns these private entities and sets this crap up in these clubs? It's insane. There's so much spiritual warfare going on. There's 7 levels of spiritual warfare down to the basis for one, and that's all coming to surface. Then there's the Georgia Guidestones that are copying the end times 500,000 gathering army right now with their 500,000 number. And all the other things that they counterfeit, Yah's 500,000 elect that are like in prophecy called as golden eagles, because the Father's doing a great work in them right now. The Pentagon wants to make insects like locusts, like cybernetic little robot insects. And then they're going to use that on a nano level to make it bigger. Anything they do on a minuscule level, they can magnify and expand and make into larger size forms. And this also kind of reflects Morlun's. This is like a type shadow of Wormwood and other designer viruses and bioweapons, these mini robots. On January 17th, it was said that space is the key to the next step of missile defense, and a new space missile defense strategy was made, which is basically Marduk's plans for the robot army. And since space has been weaponized, anything goes up there right now. It's totally weaponized, funneled from deep earth on up to surface levels. It's not just monetary, but spiritual too, the building up and culmination of things and warfare that's going on, interdimensional warfare. And this all goes back to antediluvian epics, because the Lord hated the land of the whirling wings and the winds, he said, and he described Egypt as the land of the winged ones. Isaiah 4:23, he said, I'll turn her into a place for owls, into swamplands. I'll sweep her with the broom of destruction, which in anger, he struck down peoples with unceasing blows, and his fury subdued nations with relentless aggression. He rose up against them, said the Lord of hosts. And then he wanted to cut off Babylon from the name and the remnant from the earth, all of its offspring and its posterity, and I'll make it a possession for the porcupine, the marshes of the muddy waters, and sweep it with the broom of destruction. Hell from beneath is excited about you, to meet you at your coming, for people that get pulled in there. It stirs up the dead for you, all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. They all shall speak and say to you, have you also become as weak as we? Have we become like us? So they're taunting you from the spiritual demiurge depths. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, and the sound of your stringed instruments. The maggot is spread over you. All those who follow Satan, and worms cover you. There are sounds in hell, but you don't want to hear them, really, people. I don't know what people who covet things in this world are holding on to here, because it's not going to matter if they don't have salvation. It's not going to comfort you, because your only comforts in hell are going to be your iniquities and your wickedness and the lowest forms of creation, like maggots. Majestic 12, P 180 is transcribed into the Princes of Zoan in the word 2, which means 196 in its meaning. Gematria, which means evil eye, in Strong's Concordance. Isaiah 19:11 says Zoan was a part of Tanis's magicians and had to do with Pi Ramses, Pi-Ramses. He says they're fools, those who follow them. Their minds are controlled by fallen angels. Their vain pursuit of outdoing or outwitting each other for fleeting gains and dominions. It's like a vanity show. Psalms 119:93 talks about never forgetting the precepts upon which his knowledge is gained. And that's really how life is preserved here. And I have more understanding than the elders, the prophets say, for I obey your precepts. Through thy precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way. He gave us the word, and the word made flesh to give us life abundantly. And it's like a security deposit for the next life. Yahushua claimed what fallen angels tried to assert in their pact against humanity and at Mount Hermon in Psalms 13:3, like 33 degrees. They try to counterfeit because he ascended and transfigured on that area, 33-degree parallel, proclaiming that none of that had any effect over him or his children or his kingdom anymore, nor any of the projected psychic parasitical fear and attacks and cloned, hatched, manufactured chimeras and things that live on spaceships. It was for the benefit of communion that for the saints, really, that he left them with his word and instructions on how to live and how to get back home. How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It's like precious oil poured on the head, as the Song of Ascents says. Like that mountain and God's mountain congregation that Satan wanted to break up into, and Tower of Babel, especially the north side of the mountain congregation. For some reason, our Father in heaven, he's really like the mountain himself that surrounds us, that covered them at Mount Sinai. He's the Migdal Oz, the strong tower. And we start out on a rock down here and kind of climb our way up. But we have to do it correctly, not like they did the Tower of Babel and other tribes. So God's beard is also described like a mountain too, or his mouth also alluding to the dew of resurrection. And we aspire and climb back up into that. We just got done with Pentecost, Shavuot, first fruits. Psalms 126 says, those who go out weeping, carrying seeds to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. So it's like a tall tree that we can become in his garden when we grow as his seed. And then each man has his own harvest field, bringing in the other sheaves one by one. If he did what he was supposed to do, and if he left the four corners of his field for other people and cared about other people and didn't just harvest everything for himself. Like a child that you've given everything to, that finds a gift to give back to you because everything is the Lord's anyways. Kind of like that. Just like what you give a toddler isn't really theirs, but that they earned, but it's yours. It's, in a sense, could be your money that they're spending to even buy you back something when they're older. Anyways, Isaiah 1:17 also says, learn to do right, seek justice, defend and correct oppression, take up the cause of the helpless, plead the causes of the weak and the cases. This is part of the Great Commission, to be like Christ, who bound up the brokenhearted and made the lesser ones strong, and the lawmakers who are trying to punish people who are feeding homeless people and other things going on with those situations are going against that commandment. Yes, everyone should contribute to their communities and societies any way they can, no matter if they agree with how the system's run or not. But you can find ways and be creative. And most destitute people have deeper issues anyways than just wanting to find or earn income, from my experiences at least. There's some fake ones, but most of them aren't. I've never known anybody that wants to be homeless. There's like drugs, mental illness, and things like that are all strongholds on these people that need to be broken off for the person to start to be integrated and made more whole and beneficial for a community. And they are the ones that need to clarify for themselves and identify their brokenness first and the cause of their brokenness to accept healing from the divine physician. So on another note, the movie Dark Phoenix, what that was really, that's going to be a whole book in itself, but that was the 90s files of tall whites, about mansions, clandestine operations, manipulative and gross Nordic encounters, first states of gamma ray handling, Rothschild jump trains, the first class secret space force, and anomalies that happened in that, like starting up in space plasma encounters, and fallen beings like cosmic xiii stalkers trying to harness energy that they can't have. It was also about childhood walk-in experiences, memory implants and erasures. But the reality is that we trade in all our ashes for beauty at the foot of the cross anyways, even if they're phoenix ashes. We're made new creations. But some of these handlers, they want you to die in your sins and crucify you so that you don't get a chance to do the work of carrying your own cross and crucifying the flesh, which means laying it all down and following the one who gave it all, which is the master. They're there's just so many cues in that movie, like the uniforms were yellow and blue. At first the trains were black and red and white, and then they changed to yellow and blue. Yellow always represented shape-shifting and space travel, or blue because gray was for naval operations, and then white was for psyops. They also showed the Philadelphia ship that was stuck in this hill, and then, which is actually another part of the world. And then Albidic training break-off camp civilizations. It was like on an island, which one of my brothers was part of. Then there was this magnetic parking lot at Camp Hero 2. And I remember that quite well, and it would like pull you into it for some reason. It was like they were trying to do an experiment with separating electricity and uniformly channeling pure magnetism somehow, and decoupling those two factors. And you can get reverse speech also through fine-tuning magnetism as well, and following carrier waves. So it was a strange setup, and mainly for the boys, which is odd because girls are more magnetic and boys more electric. But whatever the training was, it was later used to harness the power and manipulate laws of electromagnetism and signaling one or the other out, and using one anonymously and uniformly. We're trying to add different types of things together so you would become like a carrier tower in yourself using Tesla experiments, so that you could go into magnetic areas easier and not be as affected with exposures to radiation or other things that were coming at you, when also quantumly entangled with an immune clone too. That would also amplify and increase the outcomes in other microdoses over time that they did into the body of substances that would be harmful to man, that also leveled off in your body's system over time so that you became more tolerant. There was memory brain template switching that also occurred in certain sets of conditions due to polarity, magnetism, and particles not being stuck in time travels pulling on you, because it pulls on the electromagnetic body fields, which can turn you into ash or uranium, or like a monatomic powder type substances, so that your body wouldn't get stuck or ripped apart. You had to be molecularly fine-tuned, I guess, if not formulated correct and calculated precisely. And then the comparative collision ratios of the body's atomic mass was also pressurization and catalytic points of conversion in space divided by time itself. And that degree to which a body can handle and maintain is a key factor in mission longevity and success, of course. And they also showed in the movie your body being laid out. This body was being laid out in the cross image in the train, which I'm very familiar with because the halo tech that was strapped to the forehead was like a metal band, and it would push you into a chair or table, like drilling into your brain almost. It was what it felt like a point that was drilling into your third eye. And then then they would project images of their future outcomes and their objectives, like burning the image of the beast in your brain. And it would try to push your consciousness out completely, like kick your consciousness out of your body, your original body. And then that could let a Nephilim inhabit the body, which would brand you and sear your conscience, branding you a reprobate. So in my experiences with that, it's like an ultra quantum LAMB shift, LAMB, to not let that happen because it happens so fast. And you actually see dust particles flying and other things. And it does look kind of purple and beyond ultraviolet and infrared. And it's interesting that they call the state of carbon-hydrogen bonding matter essential, which is the essential human blueprint component, a LAMB shift. And our Messiah is the Lamb. And then they try to kick the soul and spirit out of the temple. Their sacrifice to the Dark Lord. Their carbon, altered carbon. So, korban means sacrifice. So you can send the intention back to the source, though. And because it's operating in a microwave frequency spectrum, at its base level, like clones do, and then they're triggered and tripped out. That's what happens. But because like I said before, it was this high council of druids that were operating this tech and torture tech in the end, and they showed this green Luciferian infection in Supergirl and all these other movies, which is also the Montauk green putrid signature of the Draconian Empire, which were just Luciferian host vessels. And it's like that when that was trying to replace the yellow sunlight that was natural and healing to us, that natural plasma state that we would jump into at every chance that would heal us out there. So then what they did was they would put up this filter, like a sun blocking net that looked like a beehive at Camp Hero, so we couldn't heal as fast or draw strength as fast when we stood in the sun. And I think the sun was harmful to the Anunnaki too and the other creations out there, and it felt like they were more like cave dwellers or something. So they tried to block out the sun from us. But anyways, about that land shift. There is cold atomic gas experiments, and they found that a photonic acoustic vibrating analog emits a type of land shift in the presence of a quantum or synthetic vacuum. So it's preferably synthetic so they can have more seemingly controllable parameters, and this is a vector gradient parabola offshoot. Then this optical fluctuation that happens in these vacuums, an EM field, perturbs the positions of the hydrogen atoms or a single bound electron, and the transition of atomic hydrogen corresponds to altered carbon. And these physicists just had 111 neutral atoms trapped in this certain motif, and it was almost a three-dimensional square that they had going. But there's fermion systems, FER, MION, and those are quark and leptons, and composite particles made of an odd number of these, like baryons and atoms, other atoms of the nuclei. Okay, so then there's gauge theory, G-A-U-G-E, symmetry and semantics field theory, in which the Lagrangian is invariant under certain Lie groups, L-I-E, yes, Lie groups, they call them, of local transformations. So the term gauge refers to any specific mathematical formulation to regulate redundant degrees of freedom in the Lagrangian. Lagrangian, not gradient, L-A-G-R-A-G-I-A-N, Lagrangian. And that's a whole study in itself, the Lagrangian fields that they're mapping out. It's like outlining autism because it doesn't really give you the full answers for quantum physics, just another outlier system. But being a lie is a reformulation of classical mechanics. There's also what's called quantum chromodynamics, and that's the theory of strong interaction between quarks and gluons, the fundamental particles that make up composite hadrons like the proton, neutron, and pion, P-I-O-N. Then there's QCD, and that's a type of quantum field theory called a non-abelian gauge theory. And then quantum electrodynamics. Quantum computing dynamics is the QCD. So it's the electrodynamic part is how light and matter interacts, and it's the first theory where full agreement between quantum mechanics and special relativity was achieved. So then we have muons and muons, and those are electrical charges of -1, E, and a spin of 1/2, but with a much greater mass. And that's what's missing from a lot of CERN components, why you can shut them down. Then there's muonic hydrogen, and when you look at fractalization elements, they can be subdivided even. So the tetragrammatron, YHVH, Yahweh, the 4 elements are composed in that: water, earth, air, fire, and the formations from whose mouth all things were created. There's bosonic particles, which enhance energy shifts, like the Bose radio when it came back out, that type of spelling that was supposed to be so good. They call those Bose enhancements. And the key to high temperature superconductivity is the Casimir effect, which is a perihelion juncture. Then we have Ramsey's spectroscopy, which is a measurement of atoms with interferometry, and that's a transition of the frequencies in atoms like the ARPS, angular rate of particle spin, angular It's pulsed to create a superposition of two emotional states. The atoms are trapped in a lattice. The flash that they put in there shakes the optical lattice in an interrogation time phase difference that accumulates between the two states depending on their energy differences. I think it's supposed to be energy rates, not emotional rates. Sorry. An identical second pulse measures differences by determining its final occupation probability of the two states. So they pulse it with a second identical pulse, and that measures the difference and determines the final occupation probability of the two states. Information about the energy differences is extracted by measuring the number of atoms in each state at the end of the sequence. The phase conjugating pulse sequence is halted. Stop point. This is a construct to create an overlaid neural lattice. Yes, they do use brain lace and neural nets. Brain lace, so to speak, is also how smart dust can maneuver and go over as film. Whether programmable adherence to us or it falls off us like chaff and our drops and metal alloys disappear. Like you hear about miracle healings and somebody's screws just disappear in their body from surgery and stuff. It's holy fire. What it does, if that programmable matter adheres to us or falls off, can be affected physically in the spiritual realms. To attach to the metal that's already in your body or to be healed and taken out and dissolved completely. So if you want the film to come off your eyes, you got to get into prayer. So your eye can be single with the glory of God, which is also like the shape of the earth, like an eye. It's concave, one angle, it's convex at another, it's flat when you look at it from another angle, and it's different from every angle, like a kaleidoscope, as water also is. When you hit it with frequency, energy, vibration at different angles and degrees and altitudes, morphogenetically can change. And our perception is always changing too. And God's throne is like trying to pinpoint a thumbtack in a sea of shifting sand, because it's the most protected thing in this universe. There's also, it's called quantum molecular assemblers. And that's the merging of these prepared atoms. So it's like simulated entropy in a lab or test tube perceived by varying light spectrums. And the electron angular momentum and nuclear spin determines its lifespan, and its annihilation into one photon is impossible because of kinematic, which is motion of objects without reference to the force that causes the motion, and chimantic, which are wave sets or subsets of modal vibration intercollisions. So the electron angular momentum and nuclear spin determines its lifespan, and the annihilation into one photon, which is possible due to kinematic and chimantic intercollisions. It also goes into wave function collapse points. So the photon transition lies in the UV range. Proton change in radius is phenomenologically extracted in the scattering Proteus. Hyperfine splitting in the ground state of positronium is contrasted with the annihilation decay rate. Electron and its antiparticle, a positron bound together into an exotic atom, specifically called an onium, O-N-I-U-M. So the system is unstable. The two particles annihilate each other out to predominantly produce 2 or 3 gamma rays, depending on the relative spin states. So we also have Maser results, MASER, and that's a device that sets up a series of coherent EM warm wave atoms or molecules and then excites them, and that generates this chain reaction and amplification of photons. And deuteron is 2 stable isotopes of hydrogen to proton ratio of magnetic moments. Having to do with the Maser results. So then we have spectral line astrophysics, and that deals with gases that are used in secret projects to make the body maintain a certain atomic ratio to stabilize in dimensional waveform collapse postulation probabilities, but most of that is hypothetical of sorts anyways. So there's argon ports, argon gas, a basic startup of super soldiers, exo and endoskeletal, holding up coexistent intervals like windows in time, these sleeves, these jump ports that work like a clockwork due to the distress and duress of fragile bodies formed. Then there's mental aptitude and other capabilities to factor in. Reactors and nuclear engagements are done in containment suits and rooms due to prior brain meltdowns of former proteges and prototypes. So those all got revamped in New Mexico. And there's the tritium, which is a gas used to boost the explosive power of nuclear weapons. The Savannah River site started that in the early 90s. Then there's a regeneration chamber that was accessible and available for each part of program trials and runs, and for those involved. Clone bodies could even be put in there. So the logarithmic part contains up to the cube of the logarithm. The loop radiative corrections happens with 3 photons in triads. Hydrogen water can also rejuvenate your body quite nicely. And you can also look into things like MN, which is pure product. It's NAD plus anti-aging supplement. Nicotinamide mononucleotide. And then there's also BPC 157, which is a body protective compound. TP500 peptide thymosin beta, thymosin. And then there's amino outlet bacteriostatic water, but you got to be very careful with bacteriostatic water and all those things. And another good product out there is BioX4 and Nutricross N-acetyl L-cysteine, NAC. So going back to the quantum physics, the Zeeman effect was also plugged into the Nazi tech and mind control weapons and their ways of warfare, and the splitting of a spectrum line into several components by the application of a magnetic field due to spin-orbit coupling. And that's analogous to the Stark effect. Tony Stark, yes. The splitting of a spectral line into several components in the presence of an electric field. So synchronistically, they learned that you can use both part of the EM field like a split glass window. And then that's like programming somebody with a split brain movie where one eye sees one thing and then the other eye sees another thing simultaneously. And the brain doesn't know what to do. So it shifts things into different areas of the brain. But there's also split molecular state blank slate conditioning, which led to further experiments with subatomics, fusion and fission interplays, and other separations of dual waveforms, light incongruencies, and quantum anomalies research with permutations, adherence mutations, and other successions. There's also a succession of many things going on now, and things being taken out of play, and successions just means the order of things. Even a succession of islands in the world. Okay, that brings me to my next topic. Homologous and analogous structures having the same function, what we find out in physics, and the extremes of the vessels that we're in, the bodies, is it's analogous to like a quaternary fingerprint. We're all out of the same kind of mold and substance. We're made out of the same stellar waveforms. It makes clean the nature of things compared, the resemblance of structures of different origins not evolving together. Homology is iterative. To iterate something is to grammatically apply it repeatedly, or it can be a mathematical or computational process. So things can have the same apparatuses on them and not have evolved together. That's basically what that's saying. And there's serial homonymy, which has one meaning. There's ontogenetic dipolymorphic, supraspecific, and phylogenetic analysis. Those quantum horizon points are the line of waveform collapse. That's another topic though. Quantum dots, quantum horizon points. But anyways, these vestigial structures are kind of like curious parts of our existence, like our curious organs and TCM, our brain and our uterus, things that we run into at times and don't know what to make of it. Like, what does the gallbladder do, or the appendix? Should we just cut it out or keep it? Then there's the primordial quantum fluctuation rhythm that was the first song in heaven, and the sound of joy. The analogous quantum resolution is called the QUAM, Q-U-A-M. And there's 9 associative memory conjugations with that. And there's the quantum dissolution, and that's only seen through quantum bubbles, collisions and collusions. Quantum dot funneling can be done through electroplasmapheresis or electrochemiluminescence. Quantum dot funneling. So these are quantum dot solar cells, kind of like they're enhanced photocatalytic reductions of protons within quantum dot light harvesting. And it's a catalyst of assemblies, which are electrostatic assemblies. And the platforms, like the movie Poltergeist, where the static the little girl was attracted to in the TV, it brought her into another dimension. This magnetism, when harnessed and expostulated in the brain's limbic system, looks like gray lines or flattened silver lines sometimes. And animals have this ability to sense those ley lines and other things, and uniform wave patterns and decoupling factors. Quantum tunneling versus quantum funneling. Either one of those can be positive or negative, depending on the intent and scale of intent to which the participant wants to extract or probe into a certain quantized energy field. Someone asked me about superposition and fallen angels and celestial bodies and intelligences and luminaries and all that. Enoch stated that the sun goes underneath the earth in its full circuit. And when I asked the Eternal Council for answers, they'll give it to you because they're the great counselor on high. And sometimes you'll be shown things in your mind that make more sense. There's quantum or quark flux tubes too, and those are formed in what's called string beads and breaks. And they chase superpositioning celestial objects, really. Because the smaller you get into these particles and the machines that can locate one or call it the God particle or whatever you want, it doesn't stay constant. It doesn't always stay the same. So they're chasing superpositioning. There's no such thing really as superpositioning. And zero flux with a magnetic field is how they try to do these things. But in zero flux with a magnetic field, densities of static electromagnetic flux tubes in 3 or 4 space-time dimensions is how you can just roughly map out some of these particles and things that make up our existence. Then there's dielectric constants. Then there's color-charged fields. And then there's piezoelectric discharge emulations that go into the eigenfunctions, proximity intervals. It goes into the eigenfunctions, proximity intervals to the solar irradiance variance. There's solar irradiance, there's eigenfunctions, and proximity intervals in between those that make up the variance, which also can formulate the vectors. And this can be further formulated through Ansgar Reiner's stars and stellar physics research. When you contrast the thermochronology and the landscape evolution pre-postulates and how the stars and the realms and the various systems obey the same laws of hyperquantum physics, because the earth and all its creations have some composition of stardust itself. And like I said, we're all made of like the same type of matter, and we all have that creative spark within us. So then there's cool magnetic star fields versus hot zones, and that determines the density, volume, and magnitude of solar absorption, reflection, and amounts of contained plasma, resulting in implosion or explosion into other forms of celestial fission, terrestrial occlusion, or celestial fusion. So there's unmapped particles that form the parameters outside of modern physics' ability to conjoin them into EM coupling or Dirac fields. The Dirac fields are DIRAC fields. The cool stars, like the sun, harbor convection zones capable of producing substantial surface magnetic fields leading to stellar magnetic activity, which can be siphoned into, and ships siphon into those and use it as a portal. And H3 can power the Earth for 100 years. And many things that you can extract from 0 point energy and water. But the influence of stellar parameters like rotation, radius, and age on cool star magnetism, and the importance of the shear layer between a radiative core and the convective envelope for the generation of magnetic fields are all precursors to stellar events. And transfiguration is the most important one of all, when the Messiah transfigured on the mountain, which amalgamates the flesh into the cosmic scheme of enveloping the manifold layers of existence and having at one-ment, atonement with all of creation's accord. Quantization of the Maxwell field will only loop back into Anderson Institute's base research theorems. And these abstracts are still only an outline for the delicacy in which this world lives and breathes in all its functionality through the breath of God, which everything hangs on. And the techniques of path integration were originally developed in the study of time evolution operators. And other areas where path integrals are used include statistical physics and the description of dissipative systems. This path integration is based on a beautiful intuitive description of the quantum mechanical time evolution of particles or wave functions from initial to final states, to the final resting points. So the final rest point, for me, as I see it, of all matter, is the eternal Shabbat, when creation ceases to moan and groan and long for the completion of itself, and it can enter that final rest, unequivocally in its perfect wholeness. So what you call time-dependent perturbations are only frequency fences set in our very cells, as the two sides of the hexagram make like two 8 shapes, 88, like two hourglasses. Everything here on a large to small scale, mini, macro, all has the same applications of beyond what we call quantum physics, built into the very core of each cell. The infinite potential of the body of Christ. You can't unravel that. You can't hack into it because it'll just hide from you. The most potent force in the universe is Christ himself, the creator. And the force of love that created this plane, the glue that binds and holds all matter together. That's the force between two particles that will influence the trajectories of the two particles. So, and any other forces between the two particles will influence the trajectory as well of those two particles. And the influence will be the strongest when the particles are close together. And the deflection of particle trajectories due to interaction forces is denoted as scattering. And this is denoted as potential scattering if the interaction forces between the particles can be expressed through a potentiate, love being the strongest. Truth settling the captive energy, or it's actually like truth setting the captive energy free from the restraints of this life. Then we have centripetal and centrifugal forces that are also grace and mercy, and that brings all things back into alignment and awareness and higher purpose and intent and core states of remembrance, inner chambers of presence and stillness and peace. So we can look within our temples and see outside of our temples in that space, not meditation, meditating on the Word of God and with God himself. Lie algebra, there's a lie again, LIE, 7.19 plus the Schumann 7.83 constant makes 15 the number of the sun's cube. And that's also a time travel junk code square, like the sun square. Wisdom of Solomon, and adding 1.14 as the linear and the wave function jumps to 17, and other skip sequences in those three numbers, especially when you use the number 8 or 88 again, and then divide it by -1. So the quantum harmonic oscillator is beyond linear observations, but part of the nucleus of every cell, like a background battery that's constantly sending information back to its creator that you don't see, like a never-ending computer, like a sine wave ḳeri or hologram membrane outside the DNA spiral's mapping points. No matter how much you try to quantum funnel and quantum dot all these things, there's still another layer and a sheath beyond that. Paul Reimer, R-E-I-M-E-R, of the Argonne Physics Division describes the scanning electron microscopy, the physics of the electroprobe. Then he uses a particle telescope that probes subatomic makeup of the sun's cosmic rays, which can lead to more precise cancer treatments. So that's going back to a form of plasma electrophoresis, blood plasma farming, and the sun plasma infusion farming. And kind of joining those two, like Holy Ghost style blood purification every 17 seconds. So then there's a branch of astroparticle physics that the sun, of course, gives life, but then the spiritual component of that is the Son of God is life himself. And if you don't have that, you just have a flesh apparatus, a skin suit. It's not going to hold up forever. So this guy continues the work of Raju Venugopalan at Brookhaven National Laboratories in 2016, also with Peter Petresky, and his phone number is 630-252-4037. Then there's also Sequest research that went on, and that was done by Michael Reimer, R-E-I-M-E-R again, who's at the Waterloo Institute for Quantum Computing, and that is in Canada. Phone number QNC 519-888-4567, extension 31991. So right now he's working on plug-and-play engineering features and semiconductor nanowire quantum light sources and hybrid nanowire quantum state converters, quantum memories, which is the most unsettling for me, and integrated quantum photonic circuits, as well as highly efficient quantum detectors. And also, I'll throw out there, if you want the number for the White House to tell Trump's team what a good job they're doing, you can call 202-456-1111. So, of course, we've been to the moon. It has a close proximity of Earth, and half of what we're showing is real time and half is not. There's like space fences out there, sun simulators blocking obfuscations of sky, heaven, and objects, and the capstone of the firmament to the firmament's material. Then there's megastructure cities and on and off of Earth, and the sky has these tracks that resemble the Atlantean 10 rings, 10 hybrid kings, with Lucifer's mock throne in the center, and then there's also going to be these monorail land, sea, and space systems all connecting through space ports and jump points, almost like hyperports, which also have in space. And yes, I do believe that the sky will be torn like a scroll, as Revelation states, for those who endure to the end to see it unravel. Now, the 10 hybrid kings of Revelation has the first beast with 10 horns and the AI that speaks blasphemies again with its mouth to the Most High God, testing him in his wrath. And the oceanic sea cables also rising up, and the marine kingdoms and all those living, imitative living libraries, and these marine kingdoms that are part of the beast that rises up out of the sea as well and holds all the world's major and most important communication channels, like this helmet that the bottomless pit taps into like wires, like a brain helmet, and the pit hears and sends assignments out against the children of God through these channels, because it's a kingdom underneath there. And it's why movies say things like Poseidon, Prometheus, Atlas rising rising out of the sea, because the sea will be one of the last things that we see completely changed at the end of the world, as the dead are given up at the bottom and the bottom's opened up. Then there's a group of people who will walk over the frozen ocean as hell freezes over and all the elements are dissolved. Then the moon also represents the bird and the Lord. Well, like the bride, not the bird. And the Lord is like hiding his bride in the wilderness for his time and his purposes. And the sun represents the Son of Righteousness, with healing coming in his wings. So both have been counterfeited, and their real natures hid from those who don't have eyes to see and ears to hear. And they'd rather hear a different story than what's really reality. And the ancient ways that our spirits know. So the enemy has contrived and connives plans to get you to accept the fake and study the counterfeit, so you don't recognize the real. And then you forget about the real and you fall into his vices and his Adamic sleep. And then he traps you when you buy one lie of his, and then you make these bad choices and decisions continuously. And what he's doing is just laughing behind your back every time, because he knows his kingdom is not where you belong. And like I said, the lowliest comforts are the rewards for those that go there, because he's the king of maggots, Gog and Magog. And I think God even calls him like a centipede or something at the end, trying to fight in this battle. But he looks like a centipede to God or something, trying to march still. The souls down there cover themselves with the basest of things and depravities, depraved minds. They don't have minds anymore, really. They're hollow. So back to the superposition of celestial objects. Those are our intelligences. Those were put into place for a reason and a higher purpose. All things have an order, a succession too. And the islands have an order. All land masses have an order. All bodies of water, an order. All creations, an order to them. And within them and about them. How they're supposed to operate, how they should live, and why they exist, what part they play in the grand scheme of things. And maybe all mountains and islands will be moved out of their places to move them back into their original places, because creation itself groans, it says, for the completion of itself. And it's drifted and shifted so far from original form and the glories of heaven that many parts of the earth are shadowed, concealed, and darkened by errant thoughts, ignorant living, and no understanding of what was, what is, and what's to come, really. Unreached people's groups are everywhere, and this life-giving gospel was removed from their midst a lot of times. Because so many are lost here, and so few are listening to the prophets. The ones who don't sell revelations from the Father's mouth or speak visions of the imaginations of their own hearts. The false ones are only teaching rebellion. And you can recognize that and see by looking at them that don't have the anointing. So in 2020 and 2021, that'll be a time when the prophets, the real ones, will be unmuzzled fully and reaping a full harvest, speaking through God's mouth and strengthening each other. And the false ones will be driven out of the land, and those that try to kill them will meet their own plot 3 times worse than the terror they thought up in their minds, making them a terror to themselves, like the kings of old who tried to do the same thing. The superposition of all celestial objects shining down upon us and our superpositioning of where we are was already planned from the beginning, and trying to control that is repercussive counterproductivity. It's impositioning man's logical fallacies into a book of hyperprobabilities, which is all hyperquantum physics is, really. It never produces the same results, because intent, perception, and the compass of the heart is what really guides all beings back home. The only latitudinal, longitudinal, and meridian imaginary lines there are is the reality of the cross lines, is what I see, the celestial cross. And that's the axis and crucible of all matter that we all will have to go through and see that we laid before us, that we laid stake and claim to when we chose to come here and receive bodies and to be tested with tangible warfare. that was recorded on a cosmic level for all to see. Celestial objects and stars have residues and traces and specific signatures just like we do, like fingerprints. You can scan our eyeballs even, and they have a cosmic fingerprint as they are spirits moving in all directions, like the flaming swords of the cherubim that were guarding the location of the garden and the tree of life and paradise, and heaven, its superposition to make it unlocatable in the Father's infinite wisdom, because he says the residue of them I'll deliver to the sword. Everything has a residue, and he knows it all. Their carcasses will be meat for the fowls of heaven, those who go against him, and the beasts of the earth. Jeremiah 7:33. The carcasses of this people will become food for the birds and wild animals, as caged birds of heaven. And there will be none to frighten them away. They'll send serpents and cockatrices among them to bite them. Cursed be to the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord. So he sends our enemies and other people from other nations as a punishment for us sometimes, but also he sends creatures and all sorts of afflictions. For the people that war against him, he shall be like the heath in the desert, and shall not see when good comes, but shall inhabit the parched places in the wilderness, in a salt land not inhabited. Avengers Endgame also has a lot of stuff in there. You know, they're going back in time to save the universe with these stones that fell off his breastplate. It's just a copycat of the living stones that Yah says will make us, because he's building his kingdom with us as living stones, and he'll give us new names. Even the Messiah will be given a new name as the living stones that have built the earthly altar and the dwelling place made ready for the Father to come into and become one with us, the celestial cross point, a pure sacrifice where no impurity is found, and all we have to do is just stand on the firm foundation of that rock, Yahushua, and look up in order to receive it. And in MK Ultra programming, they try to replace your heart with a stony heart and give you a stone and tell you that your heart is gone for that very reason. Malachi says there is a book of remembrance for those who remembered him that he'll make up his jewels with. So he'll clothe us in holy garments beyond metaphysically if we walk in his ways, keep his charge, judge his house, keep his courts, and he'll bring the servant the branch. Every man will also call every other man neighbor under the vine of the fig tree. When there is peace, there's so much war around Zion right now because it's Yah's claimed territory, and his Zion will be called the city of truth in the future. His four horses are the four spirits of heaven, the black one representing the north. And I just think if you haven't grasped the nature of the Father by now and what justice and mercy looks like, and love and true divine order, and then you don't belong in the kingdom. I'm not talking about those who have like little understanding still, but talking about those who just don't accept the will of heaven and shut it out of themselves on purpose. Their meaningful purpose intent to be evil, even if they think they're not. He's above all gods. And you know, people fall on their faces when they feel the power of that glory, because it shakes every part of creation down to a cellular level, and you come undone. Your whole being comes undone. One encounter with that Holy One should change you forever, because none can compare. Nothing can. And as fast as the perceiver perceives a shift, and like I said before, the ARPs and the quantum physics, they got what's called redirection. The matter itself shifts out of the triangulation of our eyes. And I was saved because I cried out to the Father, who shifted my consciousness in that lamb shift with the beast tech out of space and time for a second to cover that beast tech branding and the image they wanted to put me onto me. And he showed me the lamb in that lamb shift, who was slain before the foundation of the world, and sealed my mind in that image, so that nothing in Satan's tech or frequency could take me out of the Father's hand at that point, because he keeps count of who's his, and he says, no, nothing can take you out of my hand. So he's even where our census comes from. He commanded the Israelites to count their numbers and tribes, organize, and because he's the God of order, whose order is just and fair and right. Now the Zidonians were called the purple people, back then. The ancient Phoenicians, what's now called Sidon, and they oppressed Israel and were called Hilots as well. And they made the circuit about Israel just like they plot today, still like they're termites or something, trying to break into the city of God. Now the circuit represents external knowledge spiritually around the city, and it was also the seat of commerce. And Tyre was the king, and it was the birthplace of Jeroboam too. And the Merovingians have the king of Tyre and the ancient kings all pooled into that bloodline. And I've looked at all the genealogies all the way back to Adam in my bloodline. And King Hiram, the king of Tyre, was an ally of Israel, as Alexander the Great also loved the Israel strategy and their camps and their warfare. And he would stand on a mountain and signal to them, like looking down at this chessboard in their camps. Kind of like Trump's doing today, and all the other people who have a genuine love for the country and salvaging it in Israel and preserving it and protecting life and fighting for life and being courageous enough to do so. So Ezekiel prophesied about the sea merchants too, because but what's interesting is that Yah says, I sit in the seat of God in the midst of the seas, not Poseidon or any other portrayed little g's. Atlantis, like I said, was Lucifer's mock throne of heaven, and Yah says that those who follow them will die the death of the uncircumcised, and that Lucifer, he was adorned with these jewels at first, and it says that he walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. So in Avengers and other Marvel portrayals, they do these stone images like armor and a quest for regaining this. But Yah says, I'll cast you out as the profane out of my mouth. Because you want Yah's fire, because that's like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when the angel stood with them, covering them with his holy fire, so that man's fire wouldn't burn them. And it's the protection of that pure fire that Lucifer and his minions don't have anymore. So they just throw spiteful fire at the children of men. He even tried to burn Adam and Eve out of a cave too with fire and all sorts of things. Kept duping them. That excision, that expulsion from God's mouth, from his word, is what Hades is. And he says, the iniquity of thy traffic, and to me that's going to be likened to human trafficking and things that go beyond human trafficking even. He says, the iniquity of thy traffic, I'll bring fire in your midst and bring thee to ashes. Son of man, set your face against Zidon and prophesy against it. He tells Ezekiel. And Assyria actually was exalted once. It said under its shadow dwelt great nations, and its roots watered them by the great waters and went all the way up to the sky. It was this tree that was like cedar in the garden of God. And it was unlike any other tree in Eden that the other trees envied. Because Assyria, what happened with that is it became self-exalted. And so then Yah cut the tree down and off like he did Pharaoh, and like the great Avatar tree. It was cast in a Sheol, shut up, and delivered unto death into the nether parts of the earth. So there's these nether parts of the earth that we kind of don't have much access to, but that have always been here since the beginning. And it says, in the midst of the children of men, with them that go down into the pit, down into the grave. There was mourning, and then Yah covered the deep for them and kind of shut it up. And it's like the roots of the trees of Eden are down there. And he also says Ashur is there too. The graves set by the sides of the pit. Meshach and Tubal, those that cause terror in the land of the living, are found there too. Tubal-Cain, their iniquities shall he lay upon their bones. So their final rest is they're going to have their iniquities and their wickedness just covering them and piling up on their bones forever. No rest, no comfort. They're literally buried in their own terror. And that's why MK Ultra tries to bury you alive too, so that you will die in your own sins like them. And a Nephilim can inhabit your body then. And he judges everyone according to his ways after his own works. And I have to get a drink of water. I'm going to move this around. Give you a different perspective there. There, that's better. Okay, sorry about that. So he judges everyone according to his or her ways after his or her own work. And it says he treadeth upon the high places of the earth. But he also says, Yahweh says, I will save you from all your uncleannesses, and you won't suffer the famines of the heathen because of the craft that comes out of their heart. So if you're dead here and you are parched and you're walking not among the living, he will change that. He'll take anything off of you. He knows when he searches us out what our hearts and minds are weaving, because we only sense and rationalize what's finite in us here, for the most part, in the tangibility of it all and field vision and being tethered to this earth plane. But he sees the infinite and eternal substance that works within us and at us each and every breath that we take every day. So he sees our final outcome, and that's what he wants to show us. He's already there, whereas we are not. And he calls Hethlon a hiding place in the ancient lands and a mountain pass to Said, north of Palestine and Hamath. And Daniel 4:23 talks about Nebuchadnezzar, and he says that Nebuchadnezzar saw this watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven, and it cut down a tree. Okay, so archons didn't cut down the trees. That's a misconception, but it was Yah's will for that to be done, because he even cried at the funeral of the tree of Eden. It was Yah's will for the sins of man, because of the sins of mankind, because he didn't want to be in that close to his throne anymore. Humans, because he can't stand to be in the presence of sin. And he was degressing. Nebuchadnezzar, he also made into a werewolf-like creature that crawled on the ground and had talons, and he was eating straw in the fields for a while, and some kind of transmogrification and abasement of his DNA, so that everyone would know that no matter what they were doing with hybridization and chimeric programs, that Yahweh was still the Lord of all, and his way was better. He was the Lord of all in the earth and heaven, and the Most High God, who wanted made known, ruled in the kingdoms of men still. To make the king of, and also it was to make the king of the Chaldeans, which was Belshazzar, have a humble heart before he was slain. So then, going back to the kings of Revelation, we know Rome sat on 7 hills. The Middle East has always been Babylon, and the 7th king rules for a short period of time, and Christ defeats them all in 1 hour. And God's carried out judgment already past 5 of these. And the first beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, representing a spiritual throne from each continent. As there's thrones, dominions, principalities, dukes, legions, and so on. Different kingdoms here too, elemental kingdoms and things we don't think about. So judgment will come to the unsanctioned war dogs created from the belly of the beast, all the underground bases, the abominations, and in the military-industrial complexes. And 1 Kings 21:19 says, Hast thou killed and taken possession? And speaks unto him, saying, In the place where the dogs licked the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick thy blood, even thine. That is going to be the fate of those who seek to kill his prophets, too. Like the dogs ripped up Jezebel in pieces, and she became a pile of dung for people to walk over in the streets. If you regard the Creator as nothing, he'll make sure that you end up as nothing. Debris, non-existent. Her skulls and her hands and her feet were left like a stump, just like Dagon was left like a stump
and all these other gods that people put all their trust into. He makes those who hunt his prophets despondently cursed. He sees the reins of every person and the heart. He protects his anointed, and the Lord smote a whole army of Syria with blindness just for the prophet Elisha. And even his chosen can fall, though, because it says, man did eat angels' food, and he sent them meat to the fullest. He caused an east wind then to blow in the heaven, and by his power he brought in the south wind. He rained flesh upon them as dust, and feathered fowls like as the sand of the sea. And he let it fall in the midst of their camp round about their habitations. So they ate and were filled, and he gave them their own desire. They weren't estranged from their lusts, though, while their meat was yet in their mouths. The wrath of God came upon them, and slew the fattest of them, and struck down the chosen men of Israel. So there was murmuring in the camp. That demon called Murmur. There's a spirit to many of these things, and the rabble and all the other things that went on in the wilderness. Just like leaven, the leprosy, the toxic gossip grew literally on people's walls like mold back then, and everyone in the community could see it on you, and it made everyone unclean. He cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath, and indignation and trouble by sending evil angels among them. So you can entertain angels unaware, but he can send you good angels, or to punish certain people, he can let evil angels be amongst them too, and I've seen both. He made a way to his anger. He spared not their soul from death, but gave their lives over to the pestilence. Bent in appearance with ill intent are some. They tempted and provoked the Most High God, and kept not his testimonies, but turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow. Jeremiah 50 says, call together the archers against Babylon. All ye that bend the bow, camp against it round about. Let none escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she has done, do unto her. For she's been proud against the Lord, against the Holy One of Israel. It also says people had a heart like an adamantine stone. That's the hardest element here. So Yah scattered them as a whirlwind amongst the nations, and tumultuously kept overturning them left and right. Like, I am done with you people. There were many massacres of the Anakims too, and other tribes and giants in the time of Barak, and these people were covered in silver, gold, and precious stones too. And many nations were drowned, even ones that had the best art of war, military technology. And then he made Hazor a dwelling place for dragons, and many other places mention dragons. But the children were always to be for him a nation of priests in the midst of a crooked generation. And then he told Joshua, upon one stone will be 7 eyes engraved that removes the iniquities of the land. Many times he says things like, I've chosen this man, like Zerubbabel, for a signet, like a signet on a ring. Or sometimes he'd say the opposite, like, I'll throw you off like a signet on my ring to the bottom of the sea. So we want to be on his graces and good side. The Moabites became David's servants. Then the Lord delivered them into his hands. Josheb-Basshebeth killed 800 men in one setting. And Benaniah killed a lion in a pit in the snow. Okay, and to me, this is a typeset of reversing how Satan stalks us like a lion, wishing to steal, kill, and destroy. And also how God's going to throw him in a pit at the end of days when there's hail and snow, to be shut up forever in the end of days. So the slain lion here is a shadow of Satan in the valley of the shadow of death. And humans having the advantage over him, really, since his fate is to be sealed up in the pit and destroyed. And he stalks us in the shadows, nevertheless, but it won't be forever. And we overcome, and then God gives us also the valley of Achor for his peace to pass our understanding and come upon us and heal our shadows, so to speak. And when we love one another, we're giving glory back to him. He'll even bless the fruit of the ground where we are, and cares for us, and is concerned for what we eat even. When we fast, are we then eating and drinking for ourselves or for him, so he can increase in us? He sees and counts the sacrifice of our purpose, not our sins, because he throws those out. He says, they're as far removed from me as the east is from the west. And Yahushua is the ultimate noble act of sacrifice. He was that pure act on behalf of the universe, really demonstrating his sacrifice of love for all of humankind and preserving a life for them in the future with them. To heal that chain link all the way back to Adam. So we can know the Father fully as he knows him. So then at this time, 7 of Ahab's children were beheaded and put into baskets. Then Jehu drove Baal out of Israel, but he didn't repent, so Jehoiada ended up restoring the worship of God in the King's Chronicles. And if you repent, he drives all the Baals out of your mouth, so you don't commit adultery in your heart against him. And I also found, in reading the whole Old Testament, that most angels have weapons, and swords in particular, like the sword of the Spirit was given to us to sharpen our discernment with. They have their own. And Israel itself has a soul too. And many times Yah speaks of the actual soul of Israel. And standing in the joy of surrender, you become part of that soul group and an end times remnant. There was 145,000 men that were slain by one angel in Sennacherib's camp of Assyria. The Lord went against Assyria. The conflict with Palestine also goes back thousands of years, and the Lord protects his people fiercely from them. Israel is given land for peace and never got what they were promised by their enemies. God will give back the control of the Temple Mount in due time, and all the errors of their ways will be corrected, and the redeemable rectified in the Messiah. David slew also 7,000 Syrians, 40,000 footmen, and captains of Ammonite armies, who later then ended up serving him. And then he was blessed and was also born, and he died on Pentecost, Shavuot. And then there's all-night Torah studies too, because he was trying to elude the angel of death because he knew his time was up. And so he stayed up all night, playing his harp and other things. When people literally saw voices and sparks from the words that came from heaven as white fire letters, that was Pentecost. The Lord also says to do things in moderation, but in worshiping him, there is no limit. Do it as much as you can, always. Because he's worth making a fool out of yourself for and dancing for, like David did. And the 13th lot of Aaron's sons went to a place called Huppah. The 13 bloodlines of Cain did not. Huppah is the 4-poster canopy in marriage, like that looks kind of like the Talit prayer shawl, like the flag of Israel looks like, and it's like the covering God put over the Israelites when he married them. Job 9 talks about the earth shook out of her place and the pillars trembled. So to me, this is also correlating to the 4 corners of the Huppah and how he talks about the 4 corners a lot, the 4 winds, the 4 corners of your field, and so on. 4 archangels, which command, or prime archangels, which is a lot more than that, but he commanded the sun, and it rose and sealed up the stars. He spread out the heavens and treaded upon the waves of the sea. The kippah men wear on their heads also looks like a dome, and that's stating that you're under Yah's authority. And the tefillin bands, it's binding yourself to the will of God. Tefillin represents a total dedication and union with the Almighty, and a commitment to action that must precede thought. And those 2 boxes with the 3 letters of formation on them represent the 2 ways which you serve God in the world. Your thought, which comes from your head, and the action, which comes from your arm. And when you put on the arm tefillin, we focus on devoting strength to the Almighty. And then the head tefillin imbues you with the idea of subjugating your intellect for the love of God. The arm tefillin it's put on a level opposite the heart to teach you that if your heart isn't in sync with your mind, your decisions will remain half-hearted and flat. So all these ancient customs are multi-layered and have much more meaning than what we think. And they never died out. They preserved them so that the peoples of the earth will see that God's name is called upon you, and they shall be awed by you. It says every person 10 people will grab one talid of a Jew and say, I want to go with you, for God's with you. Yah had 12 men to each lot, from Asaph down, and numbers and offices and singers all the way to core. And 12 was the number. He made many divisions in his camps of porters and gates assigned by lot too. And 1 Chronicles 28:9 talks about Solomon's orders as well. And it says, know thou the God of thy father, and serve him with a perfect heart and a willing mind, for the Lord searches. All of the islands will rejoice. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand against this again the second time, to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea, not just from all the coastlands, but the four corners of the earth. And it's like an unfolding tesseract, and the four pillars of creation. He'll expand his land fourfold, he says too. The borders have already been designated. Sing to the Lord a new song, his praise from the ends of the earth, you who go down to the sea and all that's in you, you islands and all who live in them. Isaiah 69 says, surely the islands look to me. In the land are the ships of Tarshish, bringing your children from afar with their silver and gold, to the honor of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel. For he has endowed you with splendor. And America will have more islands than other countries as the earth cracks and breaks up into chaos. More shifting. He also says in Isaiah 41, be silent before me, you islands. Let the nations renew their strength. Let them come forward and speak. Let us meet together at the place of judgment. Listen to me, you islands. Hear this, you distant nations. Before I was born, the Lord called me from my mother's womb. Isaiah 59:18 goes on to say, to his adversaries and those who use islands, well, to me, it's for those who use islands as covert operation stations. According to what they have done, so will he repay wrath to his enemies and retribution to his foes. He will repay the islands their due. So due diligence is good fruit or bad fruit, being measured, weighed, and judged, and meted out. I will send fire on Magog and those who live in safety in the coastlands, and they will know that I am the Lord. I am against you. Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, you will fall in the open fields, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. I'll make known my holy name among my people, Israel. And in 1 Chronicles 25, the Lord casts his own lots too. Psalms 97 declares that the coastlands shall be glad and the islands rejoice. Joy is for the upright in heart. And the temple itself was this place for the present to inhabit, the indwelling. And the shewbread could be seen in there like being in the right hand of the Father, as his head rested between the mercy seat, cherubim, not just him sitting there. And he's told us the final blessing will be one day to see him face to face. Moshe got a preview of that, since he didn't speak to him in dreams and visions like he did the others, but he was more receptive to receive his image and glory than any other prophet for some reason. And he saw his face, not just his backside, and an impartation of the Spirit. So Yah came in a thick cloud of smoke too, this dark cloud, just like the judgment cloud will be like, revealing all the glory of our eyes, single to his eye, the eye of the earth. I've seen already Christ's sword coming out of this cloud when I was young, and he slew the 10 dragon kings. 2 Chronicles 6 says, arise, O Lord God, and go to your resting place, you in the ark of your might. Let your priests be clothed with salvation, and let your saints rejoice in your goodness. Don't turn away the face of your anointed one. The priests brought in the ark of the covenant of the Lord unto his place, the oracle of the house, into the most holy place, even under the wings of the cherubims. The seventh day of creation was this solemn assembly, and all souls saw that creation was good, and all shouted for joy because of how good it was. And there was reverence and rest in that pulse of creation in heaven, and we saw the face of creation itself as we looked out upon creation. And Jesus Christ was the strongest of all souls in heaven. And Shabbat should remind you of that, and that eternal Shabbat is a pause in the interval, the ceasing of the work, the creation of God's heart, to bask in the light of the heavenlies again. And you bring down that glory, and you step up in spiritual degree by doing so. our highest, so you don't fall short of the glory. Our biggest snag here is worshiping knowledge, and that separates you from the love of God and makes people whose minds are controlled by the spirits more open to infiltration and then vanity and trying to outdo each other with worldly knowledge. And it can be a stumbling block and an idol that you set up in your heart. But he can strip you of that if you let him, and all you have to do is just hold fast to him and not what you think is wisdom, and let go of it. Job 12:20 says, to God belongs wisdom and power. Counsel and understanding are his. It's only if his spirit is quickened in you, which happens when you enter worship with him in that space, and he'll increase his anointing in you, his presence. His countenance is his face shining upon you, like the Aaronic blessing. And Job 17 says, my hope will go down with me to the grave. We will rest together in the dust. Though he slay me, I will hope in him. So a godless hypocrite shall not come before him. Why do I take my flesh in my teeth? Job says, it's like Job saying, why do I torment myself? He also talks about Satan, who is given authority over him as the king of terrors, but brimstone will be scattered upon his habitation. And he'll be driven out of this world, finally, past the bars of the pit. And Job 19 goes on to describe avenging angels coming, more swords of angels. And then Job 20 talks about bankers and a ruthless society driven by greed and judgment coming to the merciless ones. And then it mentions the iron rod, the sore arrows laid to waste that the enemy shoots at us, and holy fire burning them and scattering them back to the sender. And to me, it looks like holy fire coming down is like going into like an ant hole, if you live in Texas or something, with a blowtorch into the bowels of the earth, because there's nowhere that God's spirit can't go or sees. And he says, how often is the candle of the wicked put out, and how often comes their destruction upon them? God distributes sorrows in his anger. And there is stubble before the wind, and is chaff that the storm carries away. The desolation of Israel and Babylon are lessons, and he cuts down the heads of them, even the ancient and honorable ones among them. The branch, rush, thorns, and briars. And the tail was the prophets who teach lies, the false ones, and those that were led by them were destroyed too. He had no mercy or joy on them. And the wrath of the Lord is a darkened land, it says. People are the fuel of his fire. No man shall spare his own brother, and every man will eat the flesh of his own arm. And that's how bad it was and how bad it is and will get. Because people are still doing these practices, and what it is it's a curse. Isaiah 9:20 talks about the actions of the unsaved. They'll attack their neighbor on the right, but will still be hungry. They'll devour their neighbor on the left, but will not be satisfied. In the end, they'll even eat their own children. And what will you do in that day of visitation, and in the desolation which shall come from far? To whom ye flee for help, and where will you leave your glory? So nothing will satiate people that are unsaved at this time. Just like those people who are cyborgs by this point will wish that they would find death with whatever fleshly part of them is left, and any mentality that's in that, but they won't be able to die. The rod of mine anger and the staff in their hands is mine indignation. Without me they shall bow down under the prisoners, and they shall fall under the slain. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. I will send him against a hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath I'll give him a charge, to take a spoil, to take the prey, and to tread them down like a mire of the streets. Their faces will be like flames. So that's pretty graphic. And it's a penalty for the unfaithful, the untrue ones. But he says the remnant he's doing a great work in. And the remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty God. And then he goes on to say, don't you know their tokens, their system? This is the Luciferian system that he instilled in the garden for commerce and exchange and false power, and had Adam and Eve make fig leaf aprons and all that, and make altars. Then Job 34 says, his eyes are on the ways of man, and he sees all his steps. There's no darkness nor shadow of death, where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves from. He overthrows them in the night, and they're crushed. He strikes them as wicked men in the open sight of others, because they turn back from him, and would not consider any of his ways, so that they cause the cry of the poor to come up to him. So the cry of the poor reaches God's ears, and he gets mad, and he hears the cries of the afflicted. And animals too, everything down here. Then he describes the circuits of heaven again and talks about his answered prayers and the deliverance of the non-innocent too. It's called the island of the innocent, because even those who are blameworthy will be saved through Job's intercession because of the cleanness of his hands that flows on to others. For the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. In chapter 26, he talks about marine kingdoms too, and how the dead down there are in deep anguish, those beneath the waters, and all that live in them. And he talks about Yahweh spreading out the northern skies over empty space and suspending the earth over nothing like a curtain. And the pillars of the heavens quake aghast at his rebuke. To depart from evil is understanding. Let him that hath wisdom hear and understand their place and identity in this world, which comes from the sovereign one. Even the pillars of the earth know their creator and are somewhat sentient to him, if they're going to tremble, and his highest holy ones tremble in his presence even. Job 29 talks about the jaws of the thieves and the Lord's dealings with them. It says, I broke the fangs of the wicked and snatched the victims from their teeth. So we're also to accept correction and chastisement. With vanity doth open his mouth. Without knowledge, words he multiplieth. Words. Job starts getting vain for a little bit, and then his empty actions come from pride, and he has to get chastised and corrected for it, and he repents from this. So basically the moral story with that is if you want to put your own stamp of approval on things instead of Yahweh's, it leads to ignorance. And Psalms 82 says their own way leads to death. Many paths look right, but they all lead to death if it's in your own eyes and not the way God partitioned it to be. Psalm 116 says, not in my own strength, but the Lord's, we win. Thou hast delivered my soul from death, mine eyes from tears, and my feet from falling. I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living. I believed, therefore I have spoken, I was greatly afflicted. And I said in my haste, all men are liars. And I have been there, many experiences, and being born and raised in lies. What shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits toward me? I felt this myself when the Lord froze my eyes once from tears and just stopped my tears like icicles forming in my eyes. And it just shook me and woke me up at an experience out on Devil's Island at Camp Hero, where I had witnessed sacrifices, and it just felt like I was in this pit of vipers and this lair of dragons, like so many allusions say in the Old Testament, in the wilderness, just in those times of crazy wilderness tribes and creatures that you can think about, and how Yahweh rescued his children back then from the wilderness. And those places of dragons. And Camp Hero was a Draco base on Long Island too. Psalm 74 says, God is my king from of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. You divided the sea by your strength. You broke the heads of the sea serpents in the waters. You broke the heads of Leviathan in pieces and gave him as food to the people inhabiting the wilderness. You broke open the fountain and the flood. You dried up mighty rivers. So Yah would not be a good parent if he didn't delight in adoration and relationship. Just like we as parents would be cold and indifferent if we didn't love the adoration that we get back from our children. And it goes both ways. Everything here is for a lesson and learning from, to graduate with. It's like we were born only yesterday and know nothing still, and our days on earth are but a shadow. We're like a blade of grass that withers up and dies in his sight. In the hand of the Lord there's a cup, and the wine is red. It's full of mixture. He pours out the same, but the dregs thereof, all the wicked of the earth he'll wring them out and drink them. But I will declare forever, I will sing praises to the God of Jacob. All the horns of the wicked will I cut off, but the horns of the righteous shall be exalted. Like the horns that were, the four horns that were on the Ark of the Covenant. The eyes of the wicked will fail and escape will elude them. Their hope will become a dying gasp. They'll have none to bury them because I'll put their wickedness upon them to cover them up with. And that's exactly what hell looks like. The light of the black sun is in hell, and that's the only light there. And it's hotter than the core of the earth itself. So, I mean, thank God, our heavenly parents, that only the pure in heart will see heaven and enter in. And that he set up and instituted these means and ways by which we could stair step up to him and imitate responsibly, and not take on some kind of self-appointed godhood unto ourselves, or this universe would just collapse. I mean, would you want people in your city or neighborhood, people that live by you, acting as gods and being that already? I mean, how fair is that? If we were already gods and meant to be gods, then why are we still digressing? And I haven't seen anyone with a glorified body walking around yet, so that's obviously still the oldest lie out there. Then he goes on to say, howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. Cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. He'll destroy the sinners. The stars of the heaven and constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause her light to shine. I'll shake the heavens, and the earth will be removed out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the day of his fierce anger. I'll punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and cause the arrogance of the proud to cease, and I'll lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. So the Lord will cause his people to hear his majestic voice and make them see his arm coming down with raging anger and consuming fire, with cloudbursts, thunderstorms, and hail. He at times allowed fiery flying serpents to attack cities that rebelled against him. And those who put trust in the princes of Zoan, of Egypt's shadow, carry the burden of the south into confusion, it says. And the desert owl and screech owl will possess it, and the great owl and raven will not rest there. Then there's going to be enormous hail and weather, more than we've ever seen this year, because that's just only a taste of what's to come. Because our God is purity, and he requires a pure people. The redeemed, ransom bought, blood-washed, cleansed ones will walk the highway of holiness, past those layers of dragons that he can make bow to him too, and all the ravenous beasts and fools. They'll have no joy and gladness, and sorrow will stay with them, whereas his righteous ones, gladness and joy will be with them, and that sorrow and sighing will flee from them. Psalms 126 also says, those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seeds to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves. He helps those he can use and makes them a new sharp threshing instrument with teeth that shall thresh the mountains, making them smaller and hills as chaff. So he's like, I'm going to use you. That's how powerful I am, to cut apart and break up mountains, because that little mustard seed of faith is just the starting point. He'll use us as instruments of his peace when he wants, and war clubs if he needs us to at times, breaking apart and moving mountains because of him and through him. There was also phoenixes and living creatures, and still are in heaven, that did not fall, and there's many creatures in this world still too that are not mythological and recorded in scripture. The Lord also talks about the hatched cockatrice eggs, and in Isaiah 59, it's not like a basilisk, but it has a dragon body with a rooster head. And it also says he laid Esau's mountains in heritage as waste for the dragons. To the islands he'll pay recompense, and we're to have his zeal. He puts on zeal like a cloak, it says. He's engaged with every movement on earth, fashioning it and molding it at the same time. And Isaiah 63 says, the day of vengeance is in my heart. Yahweh says the day of vengeance is in his heart. And the year of my redeemed is come. Look forward to that. Now, recompense is a theme in our world, and occult practices interfering with the sanctity and sanctification of God's house. They'll get their recompense. A people that provokes him to anger continually to his face, that sacrificed in the gardens and burn incense upon altars of bricks in their groves. He hated those things. He says, which remain among the graves and lodge in the monuments, which eat swine's flesh and broth of abominable things in their vessels. So it's like they had like cauldrons, he describes it once too, that they were cooking abominable things in and doing all this crazy stuff in the wilderness with. Lord of the Rings style, which say, stand by thyself, come not near me, for I am holier than thou. These are a smoke in my nose, a fire that burns all day. Generational sins and freedom from that comes, though, when we're born again, and our name's written in the book of remembrance as jewels, like it says. He says, your iniquities and the iniquities of your fathers together, which have burned incense upon the mountains and blasphemed me upon the hills, therefore will I measure their former work into their bosom. So he just sees it like, okay, I gave you all this stuff, like, you buy your kid a house, and then he just goes and wrecks it all. Thus saith the Lord, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and as one saith, destroy it not, for a blessing is in it, so will I do for my servant's sake, that I may not destroy them all. He wants to preserve his name, his heritage, and his children to carry on the torch, because we are his inheritance. I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob and out of Judah, an inheritor of my mountains, and mine elect shall inherit it, and my servant shall dwell there. And Sharon, the rose of Sharon, shall be a fold of flocks, and the valley of Achor a place for the herds to lie down in. And his children he also described as lilies in the valley. For my people that have sought me, so the valley of Achor is a door of hope that he gave them. My people in the valley. The valley of Achor is unlike the trapdoors that we walked through in MK Ultra, because the green door at the Montauk Mansion to me looked like a green eye whenever I'd walk into it. And I had to walk through that every day for some reason. But ye are they that forsake the Lord, that forget my holy mountain, that prepare a table for that troop, and that furnish the drink offering unto that number. I number you to the sword, and you shall all bow down to the slaughter, because when I called, you didn't answer. When I spoke, you didn't hear, but did evil before my eyes, and chose that in which I delighted not. Behold, my servants shall eat, but you should be hungry. My servants shall drink, but you should be thirsty. My servants shall rejoice, but you will be ashamed. My servants will sing for joy of heart, but you will cry sorrow of heart, and shall howl for the vexation of your spirit. And you shall leave your name for a curse unto my chosen, for the Lord God shall slay you and call his servants by another name. That he who blesses himself in the earth shall bless himself in the God of truth. And he that swears in the earth shall swear by the God of truth, because the former troubles are forgotten, and because they're hid from mine eyes. I create a new heaven and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind. Tophet, T-O-P-H-E-T, was also a reference to hell. And he says they build high places for Tophet. So all we have to do is just ask Abba, our Father, what he sees, how he sees, and he'll show you it. How he sees you, to peer into other realities and safely travel with him in the spirit. Walk in the ancient paths so your soul can find rest, because his rejection is like hell. And his rebuke makes the fruit of the rejected one's thoughts even rotten. And he says that cast out humans are as reprobate silver, because silver means redemption, and they're intentionally impure of heart, and their sacrifices will never be received then, nor do they enter into his mind or his heart, he says, because he institutes things to create a sacred space for us to approach him and commune with him effectively. But if we do it our own way, we'd all be lost forever. And he says in Daniel certain words like, certain words were closed and sealed until the end of time. So Daniel was to rest and stand in his lot at the end of his days. So we're supposed to look for the ministry of prophets, pray for our leaders in the meantime, because the ways of the Lord are right and the just walk in them, but transgressors fall therein. And he says, if you rend your heart to him and be strong and the strong one, and you execute Yah's word in the valley of decision, he will cleanse your blood even. He says that in Joel. Then Amos tells us to prepare to meet our maker, and that's exactly what we should be doing with his message, so we don't become like hemlock to him. And then Jonah, of course, went down into the bottom of the mountains, and he saw the bars of the earth even, and that Yahushua broke through and saw underneath Jerusalem to its past, present, and future, and then was delivered back up to the temple area, and his example was remarkable. So it also says we're to do justly, love mercy, walk humbly in Micah 6. And those that hunt his elect, it says, for the house of Ahab I will make a desolation, and its inhabitants a hissing. This is the house that wants to kill his prophets and apostles. And Yah says, much pain is in the loins and faces of them that gather blackness. Habakkuk states that you wound the head of the house of the wicked by discerning the foundation of the neck. So there's that stiff-neckedness and ugliness rising up of pride and hard-heartedness. And he says, woe to the idle shepherds that leave the flocks, because Yahushua is the one who never leaves the one behind and never gives up on us, pursues us, wants good for us and hope in a future. And it goes on to say in Zechariah 11, the sword shall be upon his arm and right eye. His arm will dry up, and the right eye will be utterly darkened. The shepherd who leaves his flock. The bad shepherd versus the good shepherd. It's a grievance against God if you abandon your calling, is what it's saying, because he's concerned with the welfare of our feelings. And Torah even says, like, if you're going to harm someone, damaging their reputation or something by confessing to them, then confess to him instead, and he'll spare their feelings, that person pain, and then he'll make a way for reconciliation to come through and resolutions in all our relationships. And if we're true and faithful as a remnant, that's the main thing. It says that Judah married the daughter of a strange god, or Jerusalem married the daughter of a strange god. Judah, if Yah put her away like a writ of divorce, because he's jealous for us. And he only received offerings in goodwill if if our hearts were right with him. If he's in our hearts, he sees that living inside of us, and he accepts that. Just like, if your child is lying to you, or if you look at them and discern if there's deceit in them or not, when you come face to face with them. So he made a way we can prepare to start tabernacling with him here through his Holy Spirit, impartation, and intercession. And then he says he'll smite the horses that are coming against Israel's, and then he'll blind them with astonishment, and the riders will all go mad, or whatever it's going to be. The frequency or carrier waves and repercussions are going to fall back on them to the senders. So these vehicles that have like a mini Montauk Sage radar tower on them by Raytheon and so on, if they're used for evil intents to go against his elect, it'll destroy the one giving orders, not what God protects, backfiring on them. After the plague at the end of days, everyone that's alive in the nations will go up to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and keep the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. So we'll be cleaning up the world and tabernacling with him in his heavenly huppah, because he's made arrangements, given us what we need to move in with him, just like he gave the Israelites all the Egyptians jewelry and provisions so they'd be taken care of and they could survive in the wilderness on their way out of Egypt. There'll be no more Canaanite conflict. So don't be partial in his ways and with keeping the law, but strive to do it wholeheartedly. Father's covenant. We have one Father, and his covenant should be respected and remain unprofaned, because he's the final authority of everything. He'll rebuke the devourer for our sake and deliver us from the evil one. To know God is to accept and learn from Yahushua's life. ask for discernment to be sharpened. He wants us to live a delightful and delightsome life in the land with him, and those that fear him and talk and speak about it with one another. He makes jewels, and those jewels will shine light through so that all can see and know the difference between who served him and who didn't, and those who remembered, who upheld his name. Those that sowed much reaped much, and those who sowed little reaped little, because the harvest is leading the way back to home for others, and the harvest is saving souls. The wicked will be tread down and will be ashes under the soles of our feet. So really, I guess in all of this, the main thing I want to just come across with is that he's the only constant in the quantum physics realm, and all the things that we see here and experience, and all the supernatural things I've experienced, and the visitation of angels, and all the times that he was there and took my enemies out and did this or that for me. And he was the force above all that moved things around, and the only sure thing. And like, even in time travel or all my crazy experiences, it was him that was the force above all things, constantly trying to draw me out and bring me to a better place. Even though some of my choices made me stay where I was at and got me stuck, he didn't shut me out, turn his ear or his face from me completely. And thank God for that. And I owe him everything for that. I owe him my life for that. Like I said, he moved people out of my way and showed me 10 steps ahead of the game, and just things that I can't describe here because it would take too long. But he also delivered me from many possessions, being possessed. And I had a Bible with me many times and on and off through my life and in my home life. And I even stuck one in my jacket near to my heart. And his word went with me even through time, even through technology, even through space, even through hypersonic crafts. And I have memories of this, even in undersea crafts. I had a Bible with me. So I was like almost like a time traveling missionary. And what's amazing is that it didn't fray, it didn't break, it didn't disappear like my memories did, but it's always been a part of my life and what I would come back to and build upon. And it's been the most attacked part still, and the part that they tried to erase, because it was my power source and refueling station that they couldn't erase. And because it never changed, and it only made me better each time I went back to it and immersed myself in the word and got back right, and then felt his spirit again and knew that I was going to be okay. And all the revelations that he poured out onto me and through me, it was such an advantage and a grace and a blessing over every situation and hard mental things to process. He made a calmness in there and a stillness. And every predicament or hole that was dug for me and trap, the word's power, which is our Heavenly Father's power, never changed, and it never will, even though everything else around me seemed to change too. So I'll just leave on that note for you to ponder, and hope that you take the word as a root, that tree of life, and let it grow you, and know that his temple is true, and it's where he wants to tabernacle with you. And he gave you a temple to meet him there with. And he said he would build the temple with this tender offshoot and branch of Jesse. And he showed me that in a vision too when I was little, and that's what faith is, that little tender offshoot of a branch that will grow into a tree in his garden, firmly planted by the living waters. And it's like that smallest seed that was once watered and will grow and graft you into the tree of life if you take it.